Hi everyone, I'm Julia Henze, an artist, urban sketcher, and art teacher dedicated to guiding you on your creative journey. I'm also the founder of Brave Brushes Studio, a membership for amateur artists and urban sketchers that will help you experience the joy of play in your artistic process. If you wish you could paint soft, beautiful, and elegant lines more consistently with watercolor, this three-part series is for you. In this series, you will learn different ways to use a rigger brush, which is this brush with very long bristles. It's perfect to use anytime you want to paint long, thin, and interesting strokes. Today, in part 1, you will learn a technique for painting trees and branches. And in part 2 and 3, we will cover techniques for painting reflections on water and dynamic boat and power lines. The rigger brush is a difficult brush to master, but it's worth experimenting with. You will never achieve exactly the same effect using a brush with shorter bristles. That said, if you don't have a rigger brush, you can do these exercises with a small round brush with stiffer bristles instead. Okay, let's get started. Okay, but before we start with the exercises, let me show you some of my sketches where I use this technique, because I'm sure that if you don't know what the results you can achieve, you are not very motivated to practice, right? So one of the sketches where I use this technique is this one. So you can see that the trees in the background have this very thin, very light strokes, and this is how we can create depth in our sketches. These strokes are also done with a rigger brush. They are a little bit thicker, and again, this is the way to create depth in our sketches. Also here, some branches. In this sketch, I also use this technique. In the background, the trees have quite thin strokes, quite thin branches, and in the foreground they are a little bit thicker. Here you can see that the tree trunk is thicker. I probably did it with a thicker brush, but we also can use the rigger brush to create this thicker branches or thicker tree trunks. Okay, so now we can start with the exercises. Okay, so for the exercise, we need, of course, some watercolor. And you can take watercolor from your pens with a rigger brush, but I think it's a better idea to do it with the other brush, with a thicker brush, so you can get much more paint and create a bigger pool on your palette. So it's important that you don't use the paint from the pens, but you put it first on the palette. Okay, so we first take quite a lot of water, by the way, very important. Put it on the palette, the mixture of water and the paint. And I use here a brown color, it's burnt sienna. And to create a more beautiful color, because I think it's a little bit boring if we use only one color, we can add some purple to it, and that will create a more interesting color. And we put it not everywhere on the palette. We make a pool with different shades of this mixture. So on one side it will be more brown, and on the other side it will be more purple. Okay, so what is very important when you use a rigger brush? It's important that you first relax your shoulder, relax your arm, and you relax your wrist. If you don't do this, then your branches will be very shaky, very hesitating, and not beautiful. Okay, so very important to relax your wrist, your arm, and your shoulder. How do we hold the brush? There are different ways to hold the brush, and we will see that depending on how we hold the brush, the line will be different. Okay, let's start with holding the brush closer to the ferrule. So I take some color here from my palette and put it on the paper. And let's just paint a few strokes. You can see that the strokes are, if I hold my brush like this, the strokes are quite thick. I can also hold my brush like this. It's more difficult when you hold it closer to the ferrule, but it's not impossible. Still, the strokes are quite thick. Not that thick as these ones, but they are thicker than when we hold it differently. I will show it in a minute. And a little bit less straight. Okay, so now let me show you what happens when we hold our brush closer to the tip. It's important not to take too much water and not too much paint on your brush, because otherwise you have this strip on at the end of the tip and it can create some mess. So now we can paint some strokes, and you can see that in the beginning it's a little bit difficult to paint them straight, but the more you practice, the easier it becomes, of course, as always. And you can see that they get better and better. So I hold my elbow in the air, so I don't put it on the table. If you do, you probably also can paint, but yeah, you can, of course you can. But it's better to get used to hold it in the air, and you will notice that it's quite difficult in the beginning, but again, the more you practice, the better, the easier it becomes to do so. Okay, now let's paint some curvy lines like this, for example. And the other way around. And we also can do a few smaller ones. And with this exercise, because the lines are quite short, we actually work from the wrist. In the other exercises, it will be different. And let's do a few, maybe even shorter ones, or maybe straighter ones. Like, we can try to go down with our strokes, see what it looks like, and you can see that we have this kind of dot at the end, and we don't usually have it in in the trees, but the other way around, when we paint it like this, you can see that the lines get thinner, closer to the top. And this is actually what we need for painting the trees. Okay, so now let's paint the actual tree. So to paint a tree trunk, we can hold the brush like this, and we will create a thicker line. So we also can paint the ground here, just to make it more stable. And now we can add some branches to it. And that's how we can practice with this rigger brush. And sometimes you can also create just kind of dots of very short lines. And when they are closer to the tree trunk, then they are thicker than when they are farther from it. So here, let's paint a bunch of branches, very thin ones. Maybe it's not a very realistic tree, but you can see that it's a very nice way of practicing, and we can paint more trees actually endlessly. I think it's such a nice exercise, actually very meditating and very relaxing. So sometimes if I start to do an exercise like this, I just can't stop. But let's do that now. So I would say try out different colors, try out different strokes, thicker, thinner, and play around with them. Today you've learned how to use a rigger brush to paint loose, elegant branches. You aren't going to master the technique in this series in a day. Keep practicing and the results will be worth it. And if you want to develop these techniques further, consider becoming a member of Brave Brushes Studio at bravebrushes.com. The membership includes some fantastic intermediate lessons to practice these watercolor techniques, from reflections on water to a gorgeous red capping in a snowy forest. And you can even ask me for a personalized feedback on your sketches. Let me know in the comments how you found today's exercise. How will you use this technique in your next sketch? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Happy sketching, guys, and I'll see you next week for part 2, where we'll look at the technique for painting water reflections.